complied with the court's order. 4:53 Eastern Daylight Time yesterday, and thanks for stopping by. We hope you enjoyed Jack Smith Day. The nearly 200 pages worth of evidence in the revised case of the United States of America versus disorderly J. Trump, submitted before the 5 p.m. deadline and under seal. Evidently not unsealed last night by Judge Chutkan, and no indication as to when it will be unsealed or when parts of it will be unsealed. On the other hand, Trump, as always, confesses more than he convinces whenever he's scared. Early yesterday morning, he posted something weird, even for him, that I think gives us, in broad strokes, at least what he has heard about where Smith is going henceforth. The answer, I think, is this. Smith is still going virtually everywhere he was going before the Supreme Court immunity decision. Smith may have found some way around that Supreme Court ruling. I mean, listen to the newest of Trump's 337 different explanations for what happened on January 6th. Quoting, shocking breaking news as exposed by John Solomon, real blah, 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 and the great work of Congressman Barry Loudermilk and Republicans on the House Oversight Committee, the deep state chose to disregard my direct authorization of at least 10,000 National Guard troops to ensure that Washington, D.C. was safe and secure on January 6, 2021. These deep state subversives disobeyed the president's directives, which would have prevented any unrest that day. January 6th, as it is known, would never have taken place. So to invoke Barry Loudermilk, your friendly Capitol Hill tour guide, is too inscrutable even for me to try to figure out. But Trump has brought back his most frequently used lie about January 6th, which is that he offered troops, but Nancy Pelosi turned them down. And though he left Nancy Pelosi out of that post I just read, he did bring her up yesterday in the afternoon in remarks he made around the corner from me here. There goes the neighborhood again. In Trump's reptile brain, he must be working some kind of everything I did that day was official, and everybody who responded to it was official. But they betrayed me, and they betrayed the official chain of command, and therefore I am immune from prosecution for everything. That's what I'm seeing here. And that would dovetail neatly into something one of Trump's toadies said on CNBC yesterday. Joe Kernan, the guy with the worst toupee on the network. It's so bad it looks like he bought one toupee and thought it looked good, so much so that he bought a second one and put it on top of the first one, and he wears them both at the same time. Listen to this and see if it doesn't line up with the idea that the whole day was somebody else's fault. Quoting Joe Kernan, in the heat of that moment, at that point, I think he really did believe that the election, had been stolen at that point. I don't know if he believes it anymore. Well, Joe, that's all right then. In the heat of the moment, when I smashed through the giant 40-foot wide plate glass window in the front of J.C. Penney's, I really did believe that was my washer-dryer combo in there. So Trump may be saying everything I did on January 6th and before was official, and all the charges against me must be dismissed. And why would he do that? He might do that because Smith may have found some way to say, no, guess what? None of it is official. And again, I'm way out on a limb here. But the means to that end, none of this is official. He is immune from none of it. The means to that end could be to start your case by proving that long before the insurrection started on January 6th, and long before the Christmas time meetings, and long before the frivolous lawsuit started in November and December, Trump knew damned well he had lost, and that none of his actions were as president, that all of his actions were as private citizen and politician. And if Smith can prove that, the Supreme Court's corrupt ruling on presidential immunity means nothing. We'll see. Briefly, some new polls, national, all likely voters yesterday. Harris 50, Trump 46, Big Village. That's 4 points. Harris 53, Trump 47, outward intelligence polling. That's 6 points. Harris 52, Trump 45, echelon insights. That's 7 points. One non-swing state poll, Maryland, where it's 63-31 Harris, and it's 2 Democrats for every Republican. This is mentioned only because it's a Washington Post poll, and it includes the Senate run, with the popular Republican former governor Larry Hogan essential to their hopes of taking the Senate back, and he's trailing the Democrat Angela Also Brooks 51-40, so that's Also Brooks by 11 over Also Ran. Meanwhile, in the most shocking development in the history of the governance of the city of New York since at least Wednesday, Mayor Eric Adams has been indicted on charges of acting as a foreign agent for the government of the Turkish dictator Erdogan, of getting the new Turkish embassy here open before fire inspections had been completed, and for basically ending his career for something like $140,000 over 8 years, mostly in flight upgrades and cushier hotel rooms, so like $17,000 a year. Plus, foreign contributions to his campaign for mayor that were illegally washed through fake donors, and which in turn entitled him to matching public funds for his campaign, maybe as much as $10 million. He didn't get $10 million. His campaign did. Don't blame me. I voted for the garbage commissioner lady. Adams says he is not resigning. But if you would like your I'm not resigning news conference to get off to the worst possible start, you do what he did. You go out and stand in front of the mayor's official residence, Gracie Mansion, and that's when you discover that your opponents have brought a bullhorn, and the bullhorn is louder than your own portable public address system.
New York saying that this is not a black day. This is not a black day. This is a youth day. This is a youth day, Eric Adams. This is not a black day. Your policies are anti-black. You are a disgrace to all black people in this city. The things that you have done are unconscionable. You hurt our schools. Our streets are dirty. Our children are harassed by police. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. You can shush me all you want, but the people are with us.
Can you hear me now? This is serious stuff. All evidence to the contrary. I mean, it is small-scale Clarence Thomas here, and frankly, if Adams were smart, he would announce he's joining the Republican Party. By Monday, Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo would have built a statue to him. And given that symbolically Adams had to fight his way onto the street through the crowds of people fired from or quitting his administration over the last month, it is hard to believe he can remain in office. I mean, he's barely in office now as it is. But the rest of this is freaking hilarious. This is the best comedy material in New York this week. As this is the dumbest mayor of New York in my lifetime, this has to be the dumbest indictment of any politician in my lifetime. The Turks allegedly decided that this guy Adams was exactly the right New York City politician to invest in back when he was borough president of Brooklyn. I'm quoting from the indictment. During their meeting, Adams and the promoter solicited campaign contributions from Businessman 3, who as a Turkish national could not lawfully contribute to any U.S. campaign. During the meeting, Businessman 3 agreed to contribute $50,000 or more to the 2021 campaign, believing that Adams might one day be the President of the United States and hoping to gain influence with Adams. Unquote. This is like going into a fantasy baseball draft with the first pick overall and saying, you know who I want? I want the backup catcher on the Chicago White Sox. He's going to break all the records. They've already lost 120 games, right? Wait, it gets worse. Quote, the Adams staffer also agreed to speak with FBI agents and falsely denied the criminal conduct of herself and Adams, among others. At one point during her voluntary interview, the Adams staffer excused herself to a bathroom and while there, deleted the encrypted messaging applications she had used to communicate with Adams, the promoter, the Turkish official, the airline manager, and others. Unquote. And we are far from done. Quote, on November 6, 2023, FBI agents executed a search warrant for the electronic devices used by Eric Adams. Although Adams was carrying several electronic devices, including 2 cell phones, he was not carrying his personal cell phone, which is the device he used to communicate about the conduct described in this indictment. When Adams produced his personal cell phone the next day in response to a subpoena, it was locked, such that the device required a password to open. Adams claimed that after he learned about the investigations into his conduct, he changed the password on November 5th, 2024, and increased the complexity of his password from 4 digits to 6. Obviously, there's a typo in there. It's November 5th, 2023. But get that part again. He increased the complexity of his passwords from 4 digits to 6. Adams had done this, he claimed, to prevent members of his staff from inadvertently or intentionally deleting the contents of his phone because, according to Adams, he wished to preserve the contents of his phone due to the investigation. But, Adams further claimed, he had forgotten the password he had just set and thus was unable to provide the FBI with a password that would unlock the phone. You see that meme of the guy tapping his head to show how smart he is, don't you, right now? The Adams premise here, of course, is that he is mayor of New York City, not because he was elected, but because God has put him there. I wish I were exaggerating. I am not. Some of his past quotes, quote, I thank God I'm the mayor right now. And the famous nonsense elliptical statement, quote, there is no way God created me for this moment if he did not believe this was my moment. You could read that sentence backwards and it would make just as much sense. None. And this Messiah complex is not limited to his dishonor. His niece, who says she's an actress or a dancer or a singer or something, Danielle Adams Elias, is just as nuts as he is.
Y'all gonna relax on my uncle, for real. I don't care. I don't know how you feel. I don't care how you feel about whatever decisions he had to make that you would never understand. I don't care how you feel about anything, honestly, because nobody asked you. Like when God created his story, he didn't ask Sally Sue on the other line if he can do it. That was what was chosen for this man because he was the man for the job. So like I say every time, if you have a problem, take it up with Jesus. Because we don't care. And that man will continue to do what the Lord told him to do. So y'all gonna relax on my uncle because you could never stay in your purpose and relax. Take a seat.
I think even the mayor would recognize his niece Danielle here ain't helping. Please ask for help. Anywho, it's not like anybody could have seen this coming. Given that Adams won a ranked choice Democratic primary, defeating the aforementioned sanitation commissioner and Maya Wiley, Adams has always had some curious support from some even more curious characters. Tucker Carlson. Remember Tucker Carlson? Tucker Carlson once asked, can Eric Adams save New York from itself? January 2022, the Wall Street Journal printed, is Manchin Adams the future of the Democratic Party? Wonderland. Joe Biden may have become more progressive, but Joe Manchin and Eric Adams appear to believe the Democratic Party's future lies elsewhere. Yeah, evidently in Turkey. Am I right? Brett Stevens, New York Times, July 20th, 2021 opinion. Eric Adams is going to save New York. And the best. January 3, 2022. Nate Silver. It's probably foolish. All right, you should have just deleted it at that point. If you start something with, it's probably foolish, it's probably foolish. It's probably foolish, Nate wrote. to think an NYC mayor will successfully translate into being a national political figure, but I still think Eric Adams would be in my top 5 for who will be the next Democratic presidential nominee after Joe Biden. He's going to be good at getting media attention. You bet your ass he is. And he has a chance of carving out a niche that's different from what other Democrats are offering. I didn't know he was from Turkey. That's a niche, okay? That's a potentially powerful combination given how primaries are conducted nowadays. Also, the competition isn't great. 2022 Nate goes on to specifically insist that Eric Adams was a better bet to succeed Joe Biden than was Kamala Harris, who had already been vice president for a year. And if you think this is over, the Support Democrats Who Are Actually Corrupt Republicans campaign, guess who wrote the lead story yesterday analyzing the charges against Adams for the amazingly fictional fascist Murdoch propaganda rag here, the New York Post. It was written by Jonathan effing Turley, and his lead and his conclusion, there may be less here than meets the eye. I'm telling you, he's going to try to stay on as mayor as a Republican. You watch. Yeah, I know the odds are long, and I just quoted Nate Silver, and you should never make a prediction after Nate Silver has just proved you should never make predictions like that. But I am on a one-game winning streak. I did mention Wednesday, I think, that all this Sturm und Drang by the New York Times, by the Washington Post, by Politico, even by Judd Legum of Popular Information, over whether or not to publish the internal Trump campaign documents allegedly hacked by Iran and offered around the news business by someone calling themselves Robert, that was all academic. That soon or late, Robert's rules of order would lead Robert to connect with some kind of independent journalist who would look at it to make sure they weren't jeopardizing themselves legally and then say, F it, here it is. I actually, silly old guy me, thought this wouldn't happen till next month, and instead it happened yesterday. Ken Klippenstein, formerly of The Intercept, published it. Ken Klippenstein put it online yesterday, got suspended by Elon Musk for his trouble because Elon Musk is soft as church music, and it's 271 pages about J.D. Vance. It's the J.D. Vance file. And while, as Klippenstein notes, it does give you a kind of checklist for what the Trump campaign likes best about JV and what it likes least about JV and what it's kind of meh about JV, there is nothing compelling in there. Doesn't even identify his brand of choice in eyeliner. Klippenstein then goes to the heart of the matter. To quote his post, if the document had been hacked by some anonymous-like hacker group, the news media would be all over it. I'm just not a believer of the news media as an arm of the government doing its work combating foreign influence, nor should it be a gatekeeper of what the public should know. The gatekeeper and government parts are debatable. Those actions can, on occasion, be defended. But he nails the whole other thing. The Times, the Post, and the others looked at this and they said, this is boring as crap, but my God, look at the opportunity. We can put on a performative dance here, portraying ourselves as martyrs to the cause of responsible journalism, and it doesn't even cost us a good story. There's one cautionary aside, though. Liz Mayer, M-A-I-R, the kind of all-over-the-map political operative who's probably not only the only person to have worked on the campaigns of both Rishi Sunak and Carly Fiorina, but very probably the only person on the planet to know who both Rishi Sunak and Carly Fiorina are. She has read the whole thing. I'm sorry, my God, did you think I had read the whole thing? 271 pages about J.D. Vance? How many lives do you think I got here? Anyway, she read it. And Liz Mayer says what matters is what's not in it. Quoting her, there is more damaging stuff to be found on Vance. I guess the Trump team missed it, and so have Dems. I have no interest in tearing Vance down. I disagree with him profoundly on many issues, but we have too much in common in our bios and backgrounds, so I'll leave it alone. Well, there's one Politico placing country at a party. My ass. So there's more to look for. The message of this unpublishable, now published, not that interesting J.D. Vance compendium is they left the good stuff out and it's still out there. Not to worry, though, traditional media is still burying one story at least of far more import than that, and with far more evident help from the government in the burial. The independent site Notice writes, quote, lawmakers are still waiting on the Pentagon for more details about what happened between Donald Trump's campaign and Arlington National Cemetery staff during last month's memorial service for soldiers who died during the Afghanistan withdrawal. The Pentagon appears to be hoping the lawmakers just forget about it. Department of Defense officials informally told at least one congressional office to let the issue fade into the background, a congressional aide told Notice. The aide said the Pentagon asked offices on both sides of the aisle to move on from the incident. When reached for comment, the Department of Defense referred Notice to the Department of the Army. Note that. As an aside, it's statements like that last one, the Department of Defense referred you to the Department of the Army. It's statements like that one that led Joseph Heller to dream up the notion of Catch-22. To resume quoting from the Notice report, the altercation prompted congressional Democrats to request a copy of the incident report outlining what had happened. The official report hasn't yet been released, but their quiet appeal to at least one lawmaker's office regarding the request for the full incident report shows the challenges the Department of Defense faces in the current political landscape, unquote. So apparently there is some illusion that if they just shut up about it, this and the prospect of anybody who's ever been in the military getting involved in the election in any way, shape, or form, like, Iraq Army disinformation specialist J.D., whatever his name was, Vance, that all this will just vanish. No military involvement. In an unrelated story, Kamala Harris has just been endorsed in a New York Times op-ed by the guy who was killing al-Qaeda leaders in Iraq for George Bush 20 years ago and mocking President Obama and Vice President Biden 15 years ago, General Stan McChrystal. Thank God they are keeping that wall up between the warriors and real patriotism. Also of interest here, you have to hand it to white trash Congressman Clay Higgins. While he was trying to claim he only meant Haitian gang members, not the Haitians in Ohio, while he was doing that, he was simultaneously telling CNN no, he meant every word he'd posted about Haitians and voodoo and get out by January 20th, and he'd post it again. Now, here is a tease. We will be premiering on Monday a new revised version of the Countdown theme music, specially recast for the election home stretch. Monday. But I can now offer you a tease. This is next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead of us on this edition of Countdown. I don't know about you, but I need a break from this crap. Adams, holy crap. I'm going to take one. I'm telling you, just become a Republican. You'll either be on the Supreme Court or you'll be the presidential nominee by next week. We'll take a break. Fridays with Thurber, one of Thurber's dog stories. It's not the sweetest of his dog stories, but it's easily the funniest of his dog stories, and it's a Thurber dog story. Next. Okay, break time over. There's still more new idiots to talk about. A rollicking edition of the Daily Roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. And sometimes this is satirical, sometimes this is directed at me, sometimes this is poking fun at friends or colleagues. No. Not this time, I mean every word of this. These are three of the scumbaggiest people in the world. As John Cleese once said on Faulty Towers, this is total ass. Worse, the Bronze former New York Mayor Rudy Ass Giuliani. For once, though, I'll give him this, the timing worked to Rudy's benefit. This happened to him on the day the current mayor gets indicted for selling his soul for like an upgrade from business class aisle to business class window on a flight to Turkey, the Schmendrick. Meanwhile, in Washington, Rudy, who after 9/11 thought we should cancel the election and just let him stay on as mayor, because so what if that was what the terrorists would have wanted? He was Woody. Woody has just been disbarred. No longer allowed to practice law in the District of Columbia, which is especially sad because clearly Rudy needed way more practice. I will say this, between Rudy's disbarment and the indictment of Adams, we only needed one more event to make this the biggest week for scumbag New York mayors in the proud history of my hometown. Like, maybe somebody could have done something about Jimmy Bo James Walker, who was forced out of office in 1932 after a series of scandals, including his own chosen cops arresting ordinary women on the streets of New York City and charging them with prostitution, literally charging them with street walking because they were literally walking on the streets, and holding them unless they paid off the cops with cash or other considerations. Mayor Walker was allowed to flee to Europe with his mistress, but he came back 6 or 7 years later and naturally became a disc jockey on WHN Radio. Hi, I'm your corrupt mayor on WHN New York. Walker is buried in suburban Hawthorne, New York. Maybe somebody should have gone up yesterday and danced on his grave or something, just to finish off the hat trick. The runner-up, worser, Dylan Byers of Puck. Puck is another one of those subscription outlets in which the emphasis is on pretending that doing press releases for corporations and executives and the powerful, that constitutes some kind of, quote, news. I've mentioned Dylan Byers before. When in 2021, I concluded the last round of a decade's worth of dancing with MSNBC about going back to do a show there, Byers contacted me and told me that all I had told him and all I had said in public about my negotiations with the then head of Comcast, Jeff Shell, all of it was not true because a spokesman from NBC had told him it was not true. I asked him naturally which spokesman, and he said he couldn't tell me. He said the spokesman had agreed to be referenced in a story, but never by name. I asked him what the spokesman had said specifically. He said he couldn't tell me that either. That was part of the deal with them too. I then sent him screenshots of all of my email correspondence with Jeff Shell and NBC News figurehead Cesar Conde to confirm that what I had been saying was true and what the spokesman had not really been saying was not true. And Byers reacted with shock, like you told him he was adopted. I mean, he was genuinely surprised that NBC PR people had lied to him. Like it was the first time it happened in world history. I mean, repeatedly lied to him. In fact, each thing the anonymous spokesman had told him wasn't just wrong, it was a lie. In his follow-up story, Byers still somehow managed to carry some of NBC's waters for it by saying that I should have known that Jeff Shell was lying to me. That's not quite the flex you think it is. In any event, Byers has now moved on to the Olivia Newsy RFK Jr. story and is, surprisingly enough, carrying water for RFK Jr. He's one of these morons propagating the idea that RFK is going to get Newsy prosecuted or arrested or sued because she sent him photos of herself that he wanted. And he never bothered to tell her bosses to ask her to stop. But he's RFK. And the other one's Dylan Byers, so Dylan Byers must serve him. Dylan Byers wrote up the story for Puck on Wednesday night, and since I regularly swipe at him on Twitter and here for doing crap like this, he decided to throw me into his update and said I had rushed, was the word, rushed to remind everybody that Olivia and I had lived together and that I should grow up. I rushed. I never revealed the relationship publicly from the time it started until Monday afternoon of this week when the New York Post found out and asked me. And thus I followed the age-old truth about how to deal with reporters barging in on your personal life. If you can, blow up their scoop. report what they're going to report before they can report it. It isn't much, but it always ruins their day. Yeah, I rushed, Dylan. I kept it private, as it would have stayed private, for well over a decade. I rushed. I mean, I don't run fast, but I can rush faster than 10 years worth. Idiot. I'd urge you to grow up too, but in fact, I like dealing with you as you are, a child. It's much easier to send you to bed without your supper this way. Oh, and I might add, a couple of years ago, a prominent reporter got a terrible, fatal diagnosis about an awful disease. And within weeks, Dylan Byers had written an article in which he gratuitously threw the reporter's name into the story that had nothing to do with him and insulted him. Just a drive-by shot at a dying man for no reason and with no explanation. There are a lot of bad media reporters. This Byers guy is the worst. But ultimately, he's still only a media reporter. So if somebody else shows up Monday claiming to be Dylan Byers and it's a different guy, nobody will know the difference. A media reporter cannot even win the worst person's competition because the winner, the worst, is white trash Congressman Clay Higgins, R, Louisiana, and the R stands for racist. You will recall Higgins came this close to dropping the N-word Wednesday on the Haitian Bridge Group, which sued in Ohio to get local prosecutors to charge Trump and Vance for attempting to get the legal Haitian migrants in Ohio, killed. Higgins responded with something that even for this David Duke supporting, the Klan's too liberal for him, ghost bus hallucinating, insurrectionist asshole, even for him this was astonishing. He screenshotted that news story, and again, the story was about a legal motion in an American local court by Americans. And Higgins added on his congressional account, lol, these Haitians are wild, eating pets, voodoo, spelled V-U-D-U, by the way, nastiest country in the Western Hemisphere, cults, slapstick gangsters, but damned if they don't feel all sophisticated now. He's so close to the N-word. Filing charges against our president and VP. Trump's not president. Vance is not VP. Clay Higgins is probably stoned. All these thugs better get their mind right and their ass out of our country before January 20th, he said in that patois of Louisiana. Patois is a nice word for you got shit in your mouth. The Speaker and Chief Buffoon of the House, Mike Johnson, also of Louisiana, then said Higgins had preyed on what he had written, realized it was an error, and deleted the post, as a gentleman would. Yesterday, this excrement Higgins tried to walk it back, claiming he was talking about Haitian gangs in Ohio, even though there aren't any Haitian gangs in Ohio, and he didn't refer to gangs. And the filers of the lawsuit who he threatened with expulsion and targeted for stochastic violence are members of a community support group, not a gang. You never want to intentionally hurt someone's feelings. I wish I could do the John Candy Louisiana accent from the JFK movie. You never want to intentionally hurt someone's feelings, and that post was intended for Haitian gangs, you understand? Or the one from Kevin Bacon, when he's asking, never mind. You never want to intentionally hurt someone's feelings, and that post was intended for Haitian gangs. You understand? Not for, Haiti as a country, not at all. And the unintended impact that was expressed very sincerely from one of my colleagues very graciously, that touched me as a gentleman. Well, you're not a gentleman, so what the hell are you talking about? It's bad enough that this Higgins, who has behaved in public life as a disgraced, fired cop, as a white supremacist, as an insurrectionist, as a guy with the only known IQ that's in negative numbers, who apparently heard the movie title Ghostbusters once and drew from it this concept of ghost buses on January 6th and still has never even bothered to explain what he thinks ghost buses are. This guy who acts like he is the child of an alligator that mated with a barrel of rotten fish. It's bad enough that he is pretending he said something far less destructive than he did on that deleted tweet, but it turns out that Higgins almost simultaneously doubled down on the original racist tweet about the Haitians. CNN asked him for a comment, and he replied about his remarks about the Haitians, quote, "It's all true. I can put up another controversial post tomorrow if you want me to. We do have freedom of speech. I'll say what I want. It's not a big deal to me. It's like something stuck to the bottom of my boot. Just scrape it off and move on with my life," unquote. Hey, I wouldn't scrape too hard there, Higgins. Sounds like what that something stuck to the bottom of your boot is all that's left of your meager, insufficient, worthless soul. Representative Clay Higgins of Louisiana, white trash. Today's worst person in the world. To the number one story on the countdown and Fridays with Thurber, and it's amazing to me in retrospect how I read all of his wonderful, realistic, not goopy writing about dogs and enjoyed it thoroughly years before I was ever adopted by a dog. Now, reading his dog stories and anecdotes is like reading about a bunch of friends. Even that one surly friend for whom we must continuously make excuses. The Dog That Bit People by James Thurber. Probably no one man should have as many dogs in this life as I have had, but there was more pleasure than distress in them for me, except in the case of an Airedale named Muggs. He gave me more trouble than all the other 54 or 5 put together, although my moment of keenest embarrassment was the time a Scotch Terrier named Jeannie, who had just had 6 puppies in the clothes closet of a 4th-floor apartment in New York, had the unexpected 7th and last at the corner of 11th Street and 5th Avenue during a walk she had insisted on taking. Then, too, there was the prize-winning French poodle, a giant big black poodle, none of your little untroublesome white miniatures, who got sick riding in the rumble seat of a car with me on her way to the Greenwich Dog Show. She had a red rubber bib tucked around her throat, and since a rainstorm came up when we were halfway through the Bronx, I had to hold over her a small green umbrella, really more of a parasol. The rain beat down fearfully, and suddenly the driver of the car drove into a big garage filled with mechanics. It happened so quickly that I forgot to put the umbrella down. And I will always remember with sickening distress the look of incredulity mixed with hatred that came over the face of the particular hardened garage man that came over to see what we wanted when he took a look at me and the poodle. All garage men and people of that intolerant stripe hate poodles with their curious haircuts, especially the pom-poms that you got to leave on their hips if you expect the dogs to win a prize. But the Airedale, as I have said, was the worst of all my dogs. He really wasn't my dog, matter of fact. I came home from a vacation one summer to find that my brother Roy had bought him while I was away. A big, burly, choleric dog. He always acted as if he thought I wasn't one of the family. There was a slight advantage in being one of the family, for he didn't bite the family as often as he bit strangers. Still, in the years that we had him, he bit everybody but Mother, and he made a pass at her once but missed. It was during the month when we suddenly had mice, and Muggs refused to do anything about them. Nobody ever had mice exactly like the mice we had that month. They acted like pet mice, almost like mice somebody had trained. They were so friendly that one night when Mother entertained at dinner the Freerolilas, a club she and my father had belonged to for 20 years, she put down a lot of little dishes with food in them on the pantry floor so that the mice would be satisfied with that and would not come into the dining room. Muggs stayed out in the pantry with the mice lying on the floor growling to himself, not at the mice, but about all the people in the next room that he would have liked to get at. Mother slipped out into the pantry once to see how everything was going. Everything was going fine. It made her so mad to see Muggs lying there, oblivious of the mice. They came running up to her, that she slapped him. And he slashed at her but didn't make it. He was sorry immediately, Mother said. He was always sorry, she said, after he bit someone, but we could not understand how she figured this out. He didn't act sorry. Mother used to send a box of candy every Christmas to the people the Airedale bit. The list, finally, contained 40 or more names. Nobody could understand why we did not get rid of the dog. I didn't understand it very well myself, but we didn't get rid of him. I think that one or two people tried to poison Muggs. He acted poisoned once in a while, and old Major Moberly fired at him once with his service revolver near the Seneca Hotel in East Broad Street. But Muggs lived to almost 11 years old, and even when he could hardly get around, he bit a congressman who had called to see my father on business. My mother had never liked the congressman. She said the signs of his horoscope showed he couldn't be trusted. He was Saturn with the moon in Virgo. But she sent him a box of candy that Christmas anyway. He sent it right back, probably because he suspected it was trick candy. Mother persuaded herself that it was all for the best that the dog had bitten him, even though father lost an important business association because of it. I wouldn't be associated with such a man, Mother said. Muggs could read him like a book. We used to take turns feeding Muggs to be on his good side, but that didn't always work. He was never in a very good humor even after a meal. Nobody knew exactly what was the matter with him, but whatever it was, it made him irascible, especially in the mornings. Roy, my brother, never felt very well in the morning either, especially before breakfast, and once when he came downstairs and found that Muggs had moodily chewed up the morning paper, he hit him in the face with a grapefruit and then jumped up on the dining room table, scattering dishes and silverware and spilling the coffee. Muggs' first free leap carried him all the way across the table and into a brass fire screen in front of the gas grate. But he was back on his feet in a moment, and in the end he got Roy and gave him a pretty vicious bite in the leg. Then he was all over it. He never bit anyone more than once at a time. Mother always mentioned that as an argument in his favor. She said he had a quick temper, but that he didn't hold a grudge. She was forever defending him. I think she liked him because he wasn't well. He's not strong, she would say pityingly. But that was inaccurate. He may not have been well, but he was terribly strong. One time my mother went to the Chittenden Hotel to call on a woman mental healer who was lecturing in Columbus on the subject of harmonious vibrations. She wanted to find out if it was possible to get harmonious vibrations into a dog. He's a large tan-colored Airedale, Mother explained. The woman said that she had never treated a dog, but she advised my mother to hold the thought that he did not bite and would not bite. Mother was holding the thought the very next morning when Muggs got the Iceman, but she blamed that slip-up on the Iceman. If you didn't think he would bite you, he wouldn't, Mother told him. He stomped out of the house in a terrible jangle of vibrations. One morning when Muggs bit me slightly, more or less in passing, I reached down and grabbed his short, stumpy tail and hoisted him into the air. It was a foolhardy thing to do, and the last time I saw my mother, about 6 months ago, she said she didn't know what possessed me. I don't either, except that I was pretty mad. As long as I held the dog off the floor by his tail, he couldn't get at me, but he twisted and jerked so, snarling all the time, that I realized I couldn't hold him that way very long. I carried him into the kitchen and flung him onto the floor and shut the door on him just as he crashed against it. But I forgot about the back stairs. Muggs went up the back stairs and down the front stairs and had me cornered in the living room. I managed to get up onto the mantelpiece above the fireplace, but it gave way and came down with a tremendous crash, throwing a large marble clock, several vases, and myself heavily to the floor. Muggs was so alarmed by the racket that when I picked myself up, he had disappeared. We couldn't find him anywhere, although we whistled and shouted, until old Mrs. Detweiler called after dinner that night. Muggs had bitten her once in the leg, and she came into the living room only after we assured her that Muggs had run away. She had just seated herself when, with great growling and scratching of claws, Muggs emerged from under a davenport where he had been quietly hiding all the time and bit her again. Mother examined the bite and put arnica on it and told Mrs. Detweiler that it was only a bruise. He just bumped you, she said. but Mrs. Detweiler left our house in a nasty state of mind. Lots of people reported our Airedale to the police, but my father held a municipal office at the time and was on friendly terms with the police. Even so, the cops had been out a couple of times, once when Muggs bit Mrs. Rufus Sturdivant, and again when he bit Lieutenant Governor Malloy. But Mother told them it hadn't been Muggs' fault, but the fault of the people who were bitten. When he starts for them, they scream, she explained, and that excites him. The cops suggested that it might be a good idea to tie the dog up, but Mother said that it mortified him to be tied up and that he wouldn't eat when he was tied up. Muggs at his meals was an unusual sight because of the fact that if you reached toward the floor, he would bite you. We usually put his food plate on top of an old kitchen table with a bench alongside the table. Muggs would stand on the bench and eat. I remember that my mother's Uncle Horatio, who boasted that he was the third man up Missionary Ridge, was splutteringly indignant when he found out that we fed the dog on a table because we were afraid to put his plate on the floor. He said he wasn't afraid of any dog that ever lived, and that he would put the dog's plate on the floor if we would give it to him. Roy said that if Uncle Horatio had fed Muggs on the ground just before the battle, he would have been the first man up Missionary Ridge. Uncle Horatio was furious. "Bring him in! Bring him in now!" he shouted. "I'll feed them on the floor." Roy was all for giving him a chance, but my father wouldn't hear of it. He said that Muggs had already been fed. "I'll feed him again!" bawled Uncle Horatio. We had quite a time quieting him. In his last year, Muggs used to spend practically all of his time outdoors. He didn't like to stay in the house for some reason or other. Perhaps it held too many unpleasant memories for him. Anyway, it was hard to get him to come in, and as a result, the garbage man, the ice man, and the laundry man would not come near our house. We had to haul the garbage down to the corner, take the laundry out and bring it back, and meet the ice man a block from home. After this had gone on for some time, we hit on an ingenious arrangement for getting the dog in the house so that we could lock him up while the gas meter was read and so on. Muggs was afraid of only one thing: an electrical storm. Thunder and lightning frightened him out of his senses. I think he thought a storm had broken the day the mantelpiece fell. He would rush into the house and hide under a bed or in a clothes closet. So we fixed up a thunder machine out of a long, narrow piece of sheet iron with a wooden handle on one end. Mother would shake this vigorously when she wanted to get Muggs into the house. It made an excellent imitation of thunder, but I suppose it was the most roundabout system for running a household that was ever devised. It took a lot out of Mother. A few months before Muggs died, he got to seeing things. He would rise slowly from the floor, growling low, and stalk stiff-legged and menacing toward nothing at all. Sometimes the thing would be just a little to the right or left of a visitor. Once a Fuller Brush salesman got hysterics. Muggs came wandering into the room like Hamlet following his father's ghost. His eyes were fixed on a spot just to the left of the Fuller Brush man, who stood it until Muggs was about 3 slow, creeping paces from him. Then he shouted. Muggs wavered on past him into the hallway, grumbling to himself, but the Fuller man went on shouting. I think Mother had to throw a pan of cold water on him before he stopped. That was the way she used to stop us boys when we got into fights. Muggs died quite suddenly one night. Mother wanted to bury him in the family lot under a marble stone with some such inscription as "Flights of angels sing thee to thy rest," but we persuaded her it was against the law. In the end, we just put up a smooth board above his grave along a lonely road. On the board I wrote with an indelible pencil, "Cave Canem." Mother was quite pleased with the simple, classic dignity of the old Latin epitaph. The Dog That Bit People by James Thurber. done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Mugs. We are now back to 5 episodes a week, posting nightly just after midnight Eastern. Once again, there is a Monday countdown. Please send this podcast to somebody who doesn't listen but should. And a little preview, of course, about Monday. Monday's Stevie Day. You know what that means. Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, the musical directors of Countdown, arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums. It was produced by TKO Brothers, and again, their premiere of our revised theme is also in Monday's special edition. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. My announcer today was my friend Larry David. Everything else was pretty much my fault. The next countdown for today, 5 weeks and 4 days until the 2024 presidential election and the 1,361st day since convicted felon drooling J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the election, use the mental health system, use presidential immunity if we have to keep him from doing it again while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is Monday. Bulletins as the news requires. Until then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.